Well, we'd like to welcome everybody from Hellfire Agency, also known as a mission of the Church of Korihor, and also all of our esteemed friends at Latter Daily Digest. I am pleased to introduce our current discussion. Today we have the moderator of our discussion and first and longest winning leader of Mormonism's Best Beard, Gene Judson from Latter Daily Digest. We have the current winner, 4 years running, of Mormonism's Best Beard, Jacob Isbell, disciple from the Disciples of Christ. And then, of course, myself, humble second runner-up every year, Joe Rollins, Exmo Joe, also alias from the Church of Korihor. And thank you for being here, guys.
It's nice to be here.
Super good.
Cool. So we agreed, that we would debut the new godless hymn for the Church of Korihor. Jacob and Gene have been gracious enough to indulge me. I'm very excited about this new hymn because it's the first time that we have, as ex-Mormons / ex-evangelicals, atheists, as an atheist church, tried to reach out to one of our former communities, which, of course, the majority of Korihors at this point are ex-Mormons, and this is a very big passion for a lot of us. This dreadful, atrocious act, apparently carried out by one Thomas Jake Sanford in Michigan, it's sitting heavy on our whole community. And while it may not seem so, ex-Mormons, we are part of the Mormon community. So I'm going to keep our video feeds up so that people can watch us and sharing the communal nature of our godless hymns. And I hope that you guys enjoy it. This is Broken Brethren.
We once prayed here, sang our sacred songs, shoulder to the wheel we pushed along. A wind of doctrine blew my faith cold, broke our hearts, our assembly of old. Brethren, I'm here, I have not strayed. It's not our love that I gave away. Broken brethren, can't we partake just for now, as our hearts break? Communion that once was ours, set aside these pews just for an hour. The Zion we lost wasn't beyond the grave. Broken brethren, it's love that saves. Brothers, we see your tears. Sisters, we see your pain. You don't grieve alone, faith fades, we remain. We shunned each other, let our steeple fall, but we were brothers. Oh, don't you recall? We exchanged our oaths and vows, traded prophets and plates for now. River with our gods to save our souls. Love is written on hearts, not gold. Broken brethren, can't we partake just for now, as our hearts break? Communion that once was ours, set aside these pews just for an hour. Our lost Zion wasn't beyond the grave. Broken brethren, it's love that saves. broken brethren, it's love that saves.
Very good, Gene. You are in charge, my friend. Let me go ahead and pull this off of the screen. And Gene Judson, you are the man with the plan.
Okay, so it's Joe. It was Joe's idea to have some believers and we'll say non-believers get together and chat about what would it take to have peaceful dialogue, right? Let's calm the rhetoric down and let's try to set an example for how we can move forward in this trying time.
Yeah, I think so.
Joe, do you want to start out with a sort of a declaration?
Sure. I don't have much prepared for this except what I usually say. But usually I'm talking about political violence, which this time I'm pretty convinced we are actually talking about political violence. So I don't know that we can say that as yet. But now we have an opportunity to say it about religious violence. I usually come out with a statement after some act of political violence, which in 2025 has been a lot more than any of us would like, about how it's not only morally wrong because people lose their lives, but it's frankly strategically stupid because it doesn't convince anybody. It doesn't change anybody's mind. In fact, it more than anything tends to cause people to double down in the rhetoric that they already believe. So if the objective is to change hearts and minds, it just doesn't work. There's no shock and awe that comes to, fighting political infighting. When it comes to religious violence, frankly, especially in the Mormon community, it's something we have seen too often. We've had too much of it already. And it's easy to joke about, or to make light of, Mountain Meadows Massacre all these years later. It's easy to talk about the 1838 Mormon War all these years later. I just did a video responding to Jacob Hansen, who's very famous for having gotten himself a nice little shiner from Jacob Isbell here, surely by accident. He talked
hands.
laying on of hands. But he was he had made a statement on Ward Radio recently where somebody had said, look, when you have one group where half the people seem to be celebrating political violence, obviously they're talking about the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and half of the entire group is celebrating it, then all the people who have that ideology are all the same, and they're all part of this. And Jacob, for a change, said something I agree with. Actually, Jacob Hansen, I'm a little disgusted to say, says things I agree with more than I would be comfortable to admit. But that's kind of the thing, right? We actually are a lot more alike than we are not. But the thing that's interesting for me was he said, I just don't agree with that. You just can't say that because certain acts of political violence or acts of violence happen, that everybody who shares the ideology of that person, that individual, is guilty in some way. And I think that's important. That's like he's actually making the most important point there. And I agree. The example I put up is the attempted assassination of Governor Lilburn Boggs. Mormons for 200 years going on have, held the rumor that, they attempted to assassinate the governor of Missouri using Orem Porter Rockwell. And frankly, they likely did. We don't know, but yeah, they likely did that. But, for 200 years, it's been maintained a secret. Porter Rockwell was very good at not talking about murders he did, and which is a good quality in a murderer, I guess. But, does that make every person in Mormonism a murderer? Even with all the ideology of, you look at the Book of Mormon, the, Laban and the story about, it's better that one man should perish. Okay, you can associate the ideology and see where it applies. And Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell and Ted Bundy and so on and so forth. But frankly, it just does not make every Mormon complicit. And so similarly, I think with what happened with Charlie Kirk, we have to be clear that while Mormons are likely involved, or somebody in the Mormon sphere is involved, and we don't know, and I'm not convinced that this Tyler Robinson kid did it, my opinion. But the at this point, we have to be careful that right now, even the accusations flying around that go to anyone, including blaming all the MAGA because this guy apparently was a Trump supporter or something like that, all of the Republicans, that we have to stop. That kind of rhetoric just has to stop, because that's where the violence comes in. We get into our echo chambers, and it becomes too easy for us to stop talking to each other and start saying things that begin with, this is how those people are. And that's when the violence begins. And that's so it really can start with all of us reminding each other, okay, just because this person was part of that in-group does not mean that we're going to talk about them as if the entire group is responsible. That's my opinion.
There you go. And Jacob, I've interviewed Joe for my channel before, but maybe you could introduce yourself to my audience.
My name is Jacob Isbell. I have a channel called Disciple of Christ. I'm born and raised LDS lifelong, and I had a life-changing baptism of fire experience January of 2020, directly associated with learning for myself that Joseph Smith was not the polygamist that the LDS institution claims he is. My mission in life is to turn my heart to God, teach others how to do the same. I'm a Bible-believing boy. I'm a Book of Mormon-believing boy, and I very much am a heavy supporter of freedom of speech, the principles of being able to believe what you want, say what you believe out loud without fear of violence towards one another. So it should go without saying that that I condemn all forms of initiating violence against anyone. Firm believer in one's right to self-defense. But when it comes to words and disagreeing with one's words, it has no place. I love the fact that my amigo, hopefully we get to hang out with each other in person, Exmo Joe from the Church of Korihor. Alma chapter 7, for those familiar with the book, Alma chapter 30, for those familiar with the Book of Mormon, starting in verse 7, that's when you start to introduce the character Korihor. What I love when it initiates it, there was no law among the Nephites that had any power over somebody's beliefs. Everybody had to be on equal grounds. And it comes from an Old Testament principle described in the book of Joshua, choose ye this day whom ye will serve. There was debates back and forth about belief, whether God's real, whether Jesus Christ is coming, whether really is a savior. And if what the text indicates is that those who believed in Jesus Christ did not attempt to initiate violence, even with a seemingly irreconcilable difference in belief on the subject. And so I stand by that firmly, to where it is one's right to say out loud what they believe, never one's right to initiate violence because of somebody's belief.
But it was against the law to lie, right? So
yes, it's similar to laws that we have right now, to where if somebody is found liable, where they're knowingly spreading and slandering.
Or slander.
Yeah, and I think about the laws that we have today, to where when it can be shown somebody knows better and they are causing injury with their deceits, then the law would have claim upon them.
Okay. Sounds good. I know that it was a shock to me when I first woke up on Sunday morning and saw that the violence was happening. And just thinking that the day was going to be about the death of prophet of the LDS church, right? And that was going to be the big news. And instead, the news feeds and the stories were all about the sad news. And, a fire, people stop and want to see fires, right? But it's still sad when you think about what it represented, right? It represented where people were peacefully worshiping according to their beliefs, right? And so it was definitely a tragedy. I remember being young and hearing that churches were what do you call it when you're escaping from the police? Sanctuaries, right? And so not even the law could go into the church and get you. And so here is a very lawless behavior that in attacking the church was just a horrible tragedy.
And I'm just noticing such an uptick of this kind of violence. And now, when I look back, the history that happened during my parents' lifetime, assassinations of people like John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, among others, when you look back in history, you can kind of put them on a plot and it seems like very recent, but there's a decent amount of separation in between the death of the different Kennedy brothers and other political figures. Now, my perception is there's an escalation. There was 2 attempts upon the life of Donald Trump as he was campaigning to become president for a second time. Very short amount of time, Charlie Kirk is assassinated in front of his wife and children. Then there's this demonic act of ramming into a church, lighting the entire building on fire, and trying to take out as many as possible. I cannot help but suspect that with the loss of the cultural value of freedom of speech, we can disagree as vehemently as we want, but we honor one's right to believe and say out loud what they believe. If that goes, the country goes.
Yeah, I agree. And ironically, like you were pointing out, Jacob, that's the story of Korihor. But I harp on about Korihor all the time. But I mean, bringing it to now, I really do think that is the major problem here, is that we're looking at a time when, whether it's, our right to freedom of speech in relation to the government, or whether it's our ability to communicate with each other or to talk fairly about each other when we aren't in the room, when the other isn't in the room. It's like, I was thinking about it several times today. There's this passage, and I'm going to show a little bit my political bias here, so I apologize ahead of time for that. But where Michelle Obama, right? Where Michelle Obama had said in a conversation, in one of her books, that she had this conversation with President Obama, where she said, why do I have to smile in these photographs with Republicans? Why do I have to do all these photo ops with Republicans? Why do we have to do all this? And President Obama told her, because we don't make peace with our friends, we make peace with our enemies. And in a day and age where everybody's about deplatforming, canceling, or, and not just it's not just one side of it. People love to blame, cast cancel culture on the left. I've been, making quite a bit of heyday on my podcast / channel lately about Milo Yiannopoulos, who's, YouTube gold right now, because he's supposedly coming back. Well, Milo Yiannopoulos, is one of the best examples I know of somebody who was canceled by the right, and for pretty good reason. Frankly, I totally get that and understand that. At the same time, putting him further underground didn't make him less vocal. It didn't make him less crazy, and I am convinced he has some serious issues. And it doesn't make him less dangerous to anybody's cause. At the end of the day, there needs to be some sunlight that people who even you disagree with vehemently, or you consider to be a morally vile human being, smothering their voice only makes people more. It creates a counterculture movement that makes people more attuned to their message, and then it backfires. That's why I don't think canceling works. I don't think deplatforming works. I happen to think that even in our Mormon community, I'm really going to say a thing here. Please, future, just forget I said this if it turns out to be really bad. But with Divas Lazarus, what we saw happen with him, I really do feel, after all said and done, that I don't think that Mormon News Roundup was treated very well in the way that we basically, as a content creator community, kind of shut him down and made him more exclusive and more excluded from the group. I understand why it was done. I do. I don't think it was wrong to do it. I just think strategically whenever we do something like this, whenever we stifle somebody's voice, we shut down the communication, and that's where the contempt breeds into hate, and hate, multiplies into violence. So that's how I feel about it anyway. But I think Jacob's right about that. And Jacob and I don't agree on that much. We agree on quite a few things. But those of you who want to see how much we can disagree can watch our first interaction about the Nauvoo expositor.
There's some pretty heavy disagreements there. I pulled out my full force of dad voice and put some hot sauce on top of it. And even with that, very sincerely, like you and I have had solid dialogue together, my brother Exmo Joe. And I look forward for us to be able to spend time with one another in person. Here's what I look at, like the role of government. It's going to be, if you're going to govern over this large group of people, you cannot have laws that favor one group over another. It has to be rooted in, do we have moral standards that we can adhere to and apply equally across the board? I recognize communities and individuals on a small scale, they can and should assemble accordingly and keep people out because, well, we don't want to have this inside of our group. But the laws of any nation have to apply laws equally. What I think about is like, okay, when we stop using our words, we start using our swords. I reread prior to coming on this live stream the Declaration of Independence. And in the course of human history, when a government does this list of things, and it gives about 24 or so violations from the British government over people's rights, it simply wasn't observed. And it talked about, you don't give us redress. We tried to talk to you about these abuses and you didn't do anything. You lock us up without cause. You assume that we're guilty before there's been any sort of crime. And at a certain point, they said, we've been abused too long. We will no longer use our words. We will kill you in your sleep on Christmas Eve and overthrow your abusive government and set up one with better standards. There's a point. And if the standards that were set up by this brand new country, which of course was assumed to fail because most new countries do fail, it turned into, in only 1 century's time, never heard of in human history, the greatest economic powerhouse in world history. And the blessings that we have right now on a live stream, be able to yak at one another, freedom of speech, broadcast to as many as desire to tune in. It is greater to be poor in the United States of America than any other country. And I attribute it in large part because of godly principles that are protected in the founding laws of this nation. Foremost among them, I would say freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion.
I like that. Apart from, of course, my least favorite word, godly, I would say that these are secular values, but that's fine. We can disagree. We agree to disagree there.
That's what I love. That's the kind of disagreement to where, when fleshed out with words, really gets somewhere. So yeah. I like the fact that you have the ability to point out, I disagree with that term. Well, when I use the word godly values, what definition do you attribute to my use of that word?
I would say godly is something that's either mandated by God or in the same fashion or nature of God.
Like scripture-based,
yeah,
dogmatic,
commandment-based, or theologically similar to how we understand the nature of God, something like that.
Today, I asked my computer assistant how many years the world around the Mediterranean believed in, like, Zeus, right? And Joey, any idea how long?
Did it say right up till today?
Zeus was like a god to people.
Right. Oh, I would say 3,000 years.
Exactly what.
Oh, really?
My computer assistant. I don't want to say my computer assistant's name, or else she will start yakking about something. So anyhow,
she's not a faithful lady.
That's what Gene calls his wife.
And so I wanted to know, because the end was around 350 CE, we'll say, and that was due to the rise of Christianity. there were about 100,000 Christians in the year 200 and about 1 million Christians in the year 400. And Emperor Constantine made Christianity the state religion, and it took off from there. And so,
can I just, before you go on there, Gene, there's something I had wanted to point out, and I really liked about what Jacob had brought up, because I think that, it is remarkable to me how many people think that the whole entirety of the contents of the Declaration of Independence is, it starts with "we the people." It doesn't. And then it goes on to that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable right, that among those life, property,
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And the pursuit of happiness, right? And that's it. That's the whole document. When it's like, oh, hell no, that is not the whole document. The majority of the document is a complaint list. It is King
George.
Are you talking to me?
Complaints worth getting violent about.
Right. And after multiple attempts to reconcile, most people don't know about, for example, the Albany Plan proposed by Benjamin Franklin, where they sent an olive branch to King George to say, look, we will honor you as the monarch. We will give you all due respect. We will pay taxes to you. This is all we want. We want representation in Parliament. We want a president general here in America who has the power to raise armies, protect us, to raise taxes, so we can pay for infrastructure and education for our children. They laid it all out. We don't have to go to war. This is what we can do instead. And they were just rebuffed. They were just not, it was thrown out of hand. And that was the last straw. That was where they said, well, okay, then it's Articles of Confederation. Well, first was Declaration of Independence. But two of the complaints that just keep coming back to me were, and this is in my language, he disappears our neighbors and friends. He makes them go away and arrest them without anybody knowing what happened to them.
No due process.
No due process, no habeas corpus, number one. Number two, he takes them to lands that are alien, foreign lands, where we don't know what happens to them. And so everybody lives under. I didn't say that. You said.
Okay. I said
but or like El Salvador or like wherever. Whether or not, I don't mean to make this in any way political. I'm just saying, when you'll notice that when people again start to say, how long before it's me? How long, what can I say? What am I not allowed to say? Even recently, there's this document that's been circulating of what ICE is allowed to look for in organizations and track for organizations. And I've been complaining about one of the articles on there is anything that is anti-Christian. Well, I've made several statements on behalf of the Church of Korihor about how we don't hate Christians, but we are anti-Christ. We definitely are an anti-Christ organization. We don't believe in Christ. We don't worship Christ. We preach against Christ, if you will. Now, some of the teachings of a man named Jesus that are recorded in the Gospels, sure, I like him. I like him fine. But
a great philosopher.
Right. Whoever that is.
Lord.
I'm not convinced that was a first century Jew, but that's fine. I think it was probably a Jewish man in the Greek world who had studied Socrates, but okay, whatever. And probably 200 years later, but we don't have to agree on that. The point is this. It's left me with this lingering doubt that goes, I mean, have I said something here that could get me on a list? Do I have to be more careful about what I say? Not because somebody will get offended or pissed off and, take a shot at me, but because I could disappear. And so how serious would that fear be? I don't know. Should I meter my speech? Maybe I should. I'm probably not going to. I think you know me well enough to know I'm not going to do that. But, I think that Jacob's making that point very clear. When just like you were saying, when we can't use our words, we use our swords. That's exactly why I'm concerned about it.
Well, and there's certain use of words that are trying to free up one's conscience to be able to use lethal violence against another. For example, if any of us were in a room and somebody that we considered credible say, "Watch out for that man. He's going to steal your daughter away." If we believed that warning was credible, we would take all actions. We'd probably say, "You need to get out of here right now, or else we'll start using force." What happens when somebody starts saying, "This is a Nazi, this is a communist"? And whether it is or not, all of a sudden, our reflexes, or our defenses go up, and we feel our consciences freed to enact violence upon one another. So even though I believe laws should allow somebody to say, you can call somebody a Nazi if you want, but there has to be awareness. What you're saying, hopefully to the masses, when people broadcast that Charlie Kirk is a Nazi, Donald Trump is a Nazi, when you're broadcasting, Tucker Carlson, not only is he anti-Semite, but he's also a fascist. When people say that, they're promoting the idea, we now have our consciences freed to kill people that want to become tyrants.
Dehumanize.
Okay. Yeah, it's dehumanize it. And I don't believe in laws that stop that, but it makes it so it's now a divided community. A country cannot be shared when you have factions that sincerely believe the other half are depraved, violent people who will violate my rights to a degree equal or greater than what justified us overthrowing the British government to begin with.
And I suppose there are leaders that use rhetoric that cause the common citizen to feel more emotions, right?
Oh yeah,
I remember
when you've got Kamala Harris herself saying that I believe that Donald Trump is a fascist. When you have different people, what they're saying is those who might vote for me, I want you to believe that my opponent will round up millions of people because of their religion and send them to gas chambers. That's her signal on the campaign trail. Anybody who sincerely believes that, why wouldn't somebody get homicidal if they believe that was really going to happen? If I thought there was a credible candidate about to implement communism, I would gather the boys and I would be ready to enact organized lethal violence on a large scale with a clean conscience.
And I think that's just the point. So you made one point about Kamala Harris. Well, I will point out Donald Trump in the same campaign trail going out talking about everybody who disagrees with him, they're Marxist and they need to be shut down. And every time that he heard that he said that, I said, I saw in my mind, granted from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where you see this scene in, glorious 35 millimeter. But I remembered the Nazis throwing books into the burning pile. Those were students throwing Karl Marx's Das Kapital into the flames, together with all the writings of Jewish scholars that they could find that were in German, because they thought it was blasphemy for Jews to write.
I strongly recommend people look in depth at the list of books burned and find the patterns of the authors and of the content.
That's right. I mean, I agree. I gave a sermon, a godless sermon this last Sunday called "Hitler Was Bad." And it's a little disturbing that we have to say that, but there's a TikTok trend that took off for a little while of people posting videos of themselves listening to AI translated, even voice sampled versions of Hitler's speeches.
Yeah, it even got really good passion invoked from that AI do-over.
Yeah, it did.
I mean,
it was disturbing a little bit, and especially because everybody, it's like Joe Rogan featured it on his show, where he talked about, he's like, the thing is, you see him screaming in German and you think he's talking about the enemies, the Jews, the blah, 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 blah. But if you actually hear it, he actually sounds sort of compelling, because he's talking about our people and our culture and the watering down of the culture and the losing contact with our heritage and whatever. And it's like, this guy's starting to make a little bit of sense to me. And I'm like, okay, what I said, and I said in my godless sermon, I said, what exactly what the hell did you expect? I mean, this is the brochure. You don't come out with, we're going to build big ovens and stuff as many Jews as we can into them. That's not how you sell it.
Let me ask this. Is there moral justification in your view, ex-Mo Joe, moral justification to use lethal violence against a fascist takeover of the American government?
Yes. But I don't think that that we are there now. And I don't think that individuals taking it upon themselves to do it will work. I don't think it's strategically good. And I think that trying to accomplish it before there is an opportunity for democracy to work is always going to be wrong, in my opinion. But yeah,
have you seen it? I was never much of a fan of Charlie Kirk. I always found his political positions to be just kind of mainstream Republican for the past 60 or so years. He's fast on his feet at being able to recall and make his points in a short amount of time, so he gets highlight reels of dunking on college kids. I've never found him particularly controversial. Is there anything that you have ever heard espoused by Charlie Kirk or others who get into the conservative sphere that you interpret as promoting fascism?
Yeah. But I walk a nice edge on even mentioning it, because number one, mentioning it because it's true would be one thing. But mentioning it at the right time when it's needed, it's not always good. Because, like, for example, what we're seeing here with this gentleman who carried out this vicious attack in Michigan, my good friend Evan Charley put together a great blog. I don't know if you've seen it, where she talks about basically, it seems like sometime around the shooting of Charlie Kirk, whatever this man's view of Mormons as the Antichrist accelerated into some kind of depression, something like that. We don't know. Again, we can't ascribe at this point what drove this man suddenly to decide he had to escalate to violence. But is it possible, for example, that the rhetoric around Charlie Kirk accelerated into, this is the way those Mormons are because he was unalived at UVU.
Right. And happened in Utah. Must have been the Mormons.
Must have been the Mormons that did. And likely, look, the more I look into it, the more I go, well, I mean, that somebody might happen to be Mormon and connected with this in some way or part of the larger Mormon community is plausible. But does that mean their being Mormon caused them to do this? That's an assumption that's way out there. And certainly retaliating against innocent churchgoers while they're in the pews makes no sense at all. That is a deranged act of a man who thinks he can assault the big monolith of Mormonism is the only thing I can think of. Or he just lost contact with reality altogether. And we just don't know.
Can I go back just a little bit? Because a little bit earlier you mentioned that you said that, hey, there is a moral justification for using lethal violence against a fascist takeover of our nation. What did Charlie Kirk or any others active in public dialogue say that should be called out as promoting fascism?
I would say the main things I would point out that I have seen from Charlie Kirk is that he was very strong about returning to family values as a matter of policy, which for me very much called out exactly the rhetoric of Hitler specifically. And anytime I see that, I'm concerned. Now, of course, that by itself isn't enough.
Let me. I don't want to interrupt you too much, but I just want to make sure that I'm on record. I want, as a matter of policy throughout the entire nation, the call to traditional family values promoted at every aspect of community locally, as well as our government promoting it as well.
Okay, that concerns me, but I at least with you.
But you identify like the call to family values as a matter of policy. You view it as fascist.
Not
So
exclusively.
it depends on what the family values are. If the family values
Yeah.
are loving your neighbor and
Mhm.
doing good unto other people and
Absolutely. Amen
trying
and
to
double amen.
work hard and provide for yourself, but still who hasn't gotten help from family or friends or government? We all have, right? And so that's the thing is, but does family values mean to hate somebody because of
Yeah.
something?
Well, I would say I would
Right.
point out when it becomes applied, for example, into laws regarding gender or regarding
Yeah.
adoption
Yeah,
or
I just want to
regarding marriage.
I want to say out loud what I want to promote as public policy as well as much as individuals can influence. I want exclusively promotion of traditional values. I completely reject the government has any right to promote the normalization of homosexuality.
I'd
So,
say
but
that again. I didn't
how
catch
far
all.
back in traditional values
yeah,
should we
I
sacrifice
reject.
virgins so that the
I
volcano
want.
doesn't erupt?
I want to promote family values in that the government should never be involved in the normalization of homosexuality.
Okay, but what does that even mean? I mean, does that mean that the government should never recognize gay marriages, for example?
Well, I don't want the government involved in marriage at all. Like if they want to recognize civil
I agree
unions
with
for
that.
tax purposes, things like that. Just like the LDS leadership under Brigham Young, they had lots of wives. The complications came when the government wanted to be involved in marriages. But the government being involved in the promotion, the celebration of pride, of homosexuality, the actual kind of lifestyle that ends the human family. It's by choice saying we will no longer bring children into the world. The government should never be involved in promoting that, especially the pride aspect of it.
It just depends if sexual orientation is something you can convince somebody of. Can you convince? Can you have a strong argument that would convince a vast majority of people to be homosexual, or are they just homosexual?
Well, I would not want the government to simply be involved in that at all. People can make their own choices, but when it comes to what the government promotes, it should not be promoting homosexuality in any way because of the detriment that it has upon the nation.
Where's the line though? And this is where I think the devil is in the details, or the fascist is in the details. Is where does the line go from the government being secular and neutral on a subject and not involved in a subject?
Right.
When you say neutral, like here, let me say this, and I know we're talking over a little bit, and we'll try to be as best we can. The equal application of the law. So when I hear neutral, to where it would be applied the same towards anybody.
Okay, that's cool. I can agree with that, and so there we're not so far apart. It's when it gets to the prohibitions that I get concerned.
Yeah. What about protected classes? Saying you cannot discriminate. For example, somebody renting out their basement apartment. I'm sorry, we don't rent to homosexual lifestyles. We're discriminating against you because we want somebody that's in line with our values. Should there be protected classes?
I think there should be, yes. I think that there are.
And that's where we disagree. I do not believe that there should be protected rights across the board. Human rights are human rights. You don't get extra rights because of your sexual orientation.
So, right, so would you say, Jacob, there should not be a Pride Day announced by the government as a holiday?
The government shouldn't be involved in that at all. There should be zero funding for anything related to homosexuality and pride therein.
So I agree with that. If you also would agree that there shouldn't be a government holiday for Christmas.
Well, yeah, I don't think the government should be involved in it all. That's such a cultural tradition. In other words, I don't want to stop people on their own organizing and having their culture and having their values. I personally want the government out of as much as possible.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that holiday comes from
but in particular, because here's what's happened so far. I'm old enough that I remember when it was just, we just want equal rights, and it has now turned into, we want to chop off kids' genitals. That's where it's gone. How demonic has the pride movement been? And it is wrong for the government to support it in any way. Can you
cite a policy or a law that says that?
That says what?
What you just said.
Right now,
especially in that language or any other language.
Yeah. I love the documentary "What Is a Woman," where there's actual interviews with those performing child genital mutilation surgeries, calling it gender affirming care. It is genital mutilation of minors, and the government should not be funding it in any way. I support the Trump administration's attempt to make it a crime, and I want people to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of law. For me, if it were up to me, what would be the proper penalty for somebody who mutilates a child's genitals, calling it gender-affirming care? I would promote the capital punishment.
What about palling around with somebody who used children for sex?
Yeah, I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. If Donald Trump is on that list, get it public. He will receive no sympathy from me. He better have a good explanation.
There you go. So one thing about
before you go on, I disagree with, and so that we're clear, I disagree with Jacob on this. But I
see, like this is the first time that I've even opined on anything politically, and I don't know how many years. I'll say this: I had a life-changing, full-blown religious experience January of 2020. Before that, I had a podcast that was growing in popularity on the subject of politics. I recognized on a spiritual basis the Spirit telling me you're done with politics. But when I view spirituality, when I view as a nation moving towards God, it happens with that pattern that has been so well established of a loving, protective, masculine father united with his one and only wife and raising children with godly values that are enshrined quite effectively inside of the Bible and Book of Mormon, with which I teach my children. Like, for example, with my 12-year-old son, I've been able to talk with him since about age 9. When we showed up at a school and I said, hey, you see the crossing guard there? And I said, Joseph, would you guess that person holding the sign to help kids cross the street is a man or a woman when they were born? And he had never thought about it before. And he looks closer and you could see the wheels turning because he realized the outward appearances were very female with a skirt and other things that are perceived as feminine in our society. And he saw just by looking at the face, is that a man? It's like, yeah, that's a man. So Joseph, here's what's happening more commonly in our day. There's men who believe that they're women. And not only that, they want everybody else to think that they're a woman. But how long did it take you to figure out that's a man? And I let him know to where we have no excuse for ever hating anybody, ever. That we have to have sympathy, we have to have empathy, but we have to recognize that's mental illness. It's one thing to have a personal preference, but when there's a compulsion to the point of record high levels of suicide, when you want to control how others perceive you, and I teach my children those standards, and at a very young age, they're able to understand, oh, it is mental illness that's causing these things.
So some people thought that Satan had power over left-handed people at some point. So I'm going to defer to science on this, Jacob. I don't know everything about the issue.
So what does science say about? Is there? Well, let me ask this: you want to defer to science? What does science say? Can a biological man become a woman according to science? According to your understanding of science,
we're not equipped to do a scientific. I don't see Bill Nye on the panel.
But Gene, come on, Gene,
I
come
don't
on.
know what your training is.
Your understanding
in business.
That's great. And I'm a high school dropout at age 15. So let me ask, Gene, you said you want to defer to science. In your understanding of science, can a biological man become a woman?
So I know of somebody that grew up in my ward who my mother-in-law said presented as a man, but actually was a woman because they were born with both genitalia. And the doctor at that time asked the parents, what do you want, a boy or a girl? And they made the decision to do something about it right then. Now, according to you, they should be thrown in jail, but
nope, not one little bit. Hey,
they should stay both sexes.
I don't say falsehoods about you. And if I do, I should be called out. If you say falsehoods about me, it should be called out. You're putting words in my mouth that I've never said in my life.
I'm only saying my experience.
But you're telling others, you're telling the stream right now that I want people put in prison for what? Why would you lie about me? Is that in your moral standards for you?
Oh, no. You had said earlier that if you mutilate a child, that should be bad.
Yes. Now here's the thing. When it comes to the outlier, I just want to make this clear. When it comes to the incredibly rare outliers of intersex, There's a medical decision, and it happens between doctors and parents. That is something entirely different than a healthy biological male, prepubescent, being chemically castrated and then genitals mutilated. That's
right. And my point
entirely
about
different.
the left-handed
But
people was
how does that?
we didn't know
how-
about why people thought left-handed people were sinister, right? We didn't know why people thought they were controlled by demons. It wasn't until we had more knowledge that we can make better decisions.
But here's what I think the science is settled, and I didn't even get an answer. In your understanding of science, Gene, can a biological male become a woman?
I'm not. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, because I have heard presentations.
Now, Gene,
that there's like
you don't have a
9
position on
different
that?
things that can happen between the chromosomes and hormones that get waved over the fetus. Lots of things happen.
You simply can't answer, can a biological male become a woman? If it were up to me, you wouldn't have the right to vote.
There are worms that procreate without needing another worm. There are things in nature that
I wouldn't let worms vote. I wouldn't let worms vote either.
If a person believes that it's possible for a person who is a biological male to become a woman, you think they shouldn't be able to vote?
Yeah, if somebody is so far removed from reality that they believe a biological male becomes a woman, if it were up to me, and I'm not talking about what government policy should be, if it were up to me, that person would not have the right to vote.
So if it was up for me, I would let God decide 1,000 years from now whether that was good or not. But for now, science seems to be okay with it. That's why.
What do you mean? When you say science seems to be okay with it, a biological male, are they capable of procreation under any circumstance? Are they capable of bearing children in any circumstance?
There are biological males that aren't capable of procreating. There are biological females that aren't capable of procreating.
Okay, but here's my question.
Over billions of years,
Gene, hold on. I'm sorry I didn't make it simple enough to begin with. Can a biological male give birth? Can a biological male give birth?
Not yet.
Okay, so we're in agreement there. In other words, whether you want to attribute that to science or God, I'm saying my position is that's divine design. That's by divine design that biological males do not have children. So when there's humans that are not capable of continuing the species, whether you believe in God or not, it's clearly bringing humanity to an end. I don't want that promoted. Science is settled.
Okay, but wait a minute. That has very little bearing on
saying things that are based on the Bible is not a call for
okay,
peace.
then let's keep it strictly secular. If men and men are the union that's promoted, there's no more human race. Anybody who's participating in that.
Yes, let there be no more humans. There weren't humans a million years ago.
And see, that's why I want to promote. Let's leave God out of the equation altogether. The reason I want a man and a woman to be promoted and have children and raise them with strong moral values is that they create a society that's strong, that understands realities like a man cannot become a woman under any circumstance, neither vice versa.
But you're saying, okay, so can I just get this in there? Because I've got a lot piled up.
Okay.
Here. Just real quickly. Okay. Again, this goes back to, you say you don't want the government involved in promoting homosexuality. You don't want the government being involved in promoting pride or transgender people, or the idea that people could be transgender, gender could be a social construct, etc. But then you say you do want the government promoting, that a family is a man and a union and a woman and the nuclear family values. So this libertarian standard does have a caveat that says the government can promote a certain standard, but you seem to be including that the standard should be what is scientifically accurate and not what is godly per se. But of course, in that instance, we're not going to all agree on what the science should say. If we leave it to what does the science actually say, then you have to take into account the American Psychiatric Association and all of these organizations that have come out to say gender dysphoria is a mental illness, just like depression is a mental illness. But we don't argue that people who are depressed shouldn't vote. At least I don't, maybe self-servingly. mental illness is anxiety. We don't argue that people who have anxiety should have different rights under the law or should have a restriction of their rights under the law. And if the doctors say part of the care for a person who that helps to prevent, for example, suicide, or happens to prevent or promote a healthier lifestyle for that person, is gender affirming care, which is so much more. I just want to point out, than just gender reassignment surgery. Most people, as far as I am aware, don't have gender reassignment surgery per se, or at least of the kind that has been described rather graphically here. There's top surgeries and bottom surgeries, and there's, hormone therapies that, work for different people. And also there's other more social constructs, social aspects, like what you wear, whether or not you wear makeup, things like this, that are all prescribed to their doctors. If where the standard is the government can only get involved in promoting what is scientifically valid, then there has to be some instrument to say whether or not you agree with the science, this is what the science says is appropriate for that situation in a strictly libertarian society.
Yeah, and I'm not a libertarian. There's lots of libertarian ideals that I feel are very valuable. But here's the question that I have, Joe. When you're talking about gender affirming care, do you consider it moral under any circumstance to give a prepubescent child chemical castration drugs?
So, Jacob,
not as such, but to give a person hormone therapy, hormone replacement therapy.
And is there any moral quandary if it results in their chemical castration?
Yes. Absolutely. There's a moral question there to be asked, I think. And I think every doctor needs to be responsible for that. And if they are not being responsible about it, there needs to be a standard that standardizes, are you educated enough to make this decision? Are you making it for financial decisions or some other decision that's not relevant to care? And do you know the exact effect of the treatment?
And if they don't know the exact effect, would you tell them that they can't do it?
Jacob, if Donald Trump gave you the job of czar of gender assignment, would you take it?
Is there such a position?
I'm offering it to you right now.
Here's what I would say.
Just wait,
if it were up to me, I would prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, anybody who's prescribing drugs to chemically castrate children or mutilate their genitals. I find it to be demonic.
Can I jump in here? Does that extend to include circumcision, infant circumcision?
I am somebody who, as an infant,
sue my doctor,
I got circumcised. I would say go for it if you feel like that's what needs to happen. I know that there.
Your mic cut out.
I am circumcised myself. Oh,
did his mic cut out for you, Jay?
Yeah, I was going to say
your mic cut out. I just don't want you to be.
Now, I do recognize there's a similar issue that's being discussed when it's an infant having foreskin cut off of his penis. It's a similar issue because they can't consent to it. All I can say for myself, not only knowing how to use one that is circumcised, I have been fully satified in the use of that part of my anatomy.
How much of the last 20 minutes?
But the question is, should a person be allowed to vote if they think that God has given them not only the right but the responsibility to surgically alter or mutilate, some will say, the genitals of a newborn infant?
Yeah, I totally recognize that's a similar issue. I don't know how to take a stance other than like somebody who has a circumcised penis, and I don't know if I'm missing out on something if there was a hood in front of the shaft, but I don't have any regrets. I've never met anybody in life at all who regrets their circumcision, whether they were able to choose it or not. I have seen online some groups that have demonstrated.
I regret it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me ask, should your parents have been allowed to choose that for you?
I don't think religious things should be in the hospitals or governments or anything like that, just as much as you don't think
when that decision.
But
When
But
that decision was being offered, well, let me say this: when that decision was being offered to my children,
Jacob, if we
there
settle
was no
this,
relig- there was
would that
there
make
was there was no.
peace in the
Well,
world?
let me say this: there was no religious discussion. But let me ask this: just should parents be allowed to choose to circumcise their child? Why or why not?
So that was a really good question for some other program where we're arguing those things, and it's in the title and everything like that. What things can be done for peaceful things?
Yeah.
That
So let
is
me
what
say this:
I think we should get this discussion back to.
let's bring it back to the original. I deliberately did this on purpose. Whatever was deemed as fascist, I know that there's certain things that I say out loud that I sincerely mean it 100%, nothing performative, but I did it on purpose to where, have I said anything that gives anybody a right to enact violence against me?
No.
If I let me just take it one step further. Let's say that I were on a
for you.
Let's say that I were on a tour and having great success in promoting the idea that gender affirming care is demonic in the religious sense. If I were successful in promoting that across the country, does it give anybody the right to enact violence against me?
No.
Okay.
And frankly, it would be stupid for somebody to do it.
That's why we get along, and that's why I want to grill some meat for you, Exmo Joe.
I like that.
And I'll say, getting back to the peace thing, we talked about rhetoric earlier on that caused people to dehumanize other people. And I remember I was listening to Rush Limbaugh at the time. It was 35 years ago.
I listened to him against my own will, so I know.
When he moved back east from Sacramento, California, I called him once when he was in Sacramento. I called him once when he was in I guess, New York at first. But he was able to schmooze with politicians. And he mentioned that politicians on both sides of the aisle could give spirited talks and could argue things on the floor of the Senate or in the House of Representatives, and then at lunchtime go out and have a good time and be friends, right? Because they know that their rhetoric is rhetoric. It's just free speech, right? Mm. The problem is, unless people understand that they are like that, and then they have dinners, and then they go golfing, they do social things together, they treat each other like civilized human beings. We should have more articles about that.
Amen. I hope that there's thousands of. Yeah, my hope is that with this kind of violence that's being enacted, whether it's setting a church on fire or assassinating Charlie Kirk, my hope especially is that Charlie Kirk and the values that he was promoting, I hope that there are thousands more who take up that torch and promote it far and wide and make sure the laws of our country reflect those standards.
And for me, if Charlie Kirk was saying some things that people disagree with, they should take up the torch and talk about their disagreement.
I love his willingness to move those with disagreements to the front of the line. And see, me not being a fan of Charlie Kirk, much more now that he's gone, because I would see to where if you have a disagreement, come to the front of the line. And even when people think who just want to dunk on college kids, I would see him when somebody their breath would be uneven because it's difficult to have this public environment. You say, no, it's okay. Take a moment. And I saw consistently the utmost respect in that regard. So I hope there are thousands of more Charlie Kirks promoting traditional family values vehemently to the point of willing to defend it by every means. The elimination of any child genital mutilation.
Okay. Can I just jump in with that? Because I think this is where we disagree, and this is why it's important to have this conversation, is because just like you're saying, Charlie Kirk was relatively successful at promoting his values that I do disagree with.
He's probably the single most responsible for Trump's election, other than Trump himself.
I couldn't disagree with that. Apart from
I fault him for promoting Trump, but yeah, that's a different discussion.
Yeah. So, but here's the point. As soon I'll confess to you something here, okay? I'm just going to be vulnerable here because I think that's a good part of communication here. When I heard that he was shot at UVU, my initial reaction was frankly relief, and I thought and of course my immediate reaction, of course, responded to that was overwhelming guilt. I was like, okay, this is a human being. I don't know what his real internal values were. I don't know what he said just to make money or just to make a political difference. I don't know this person, and he has the right to be alive as much as I do. And I try to apply my critical thinking, because that's kind of my whole thing as a Korahor, right? Where I apply intellectual honesty. And at the same time, I thought, why am I so relieved that this man may be dead? And I realized, I thought, because then he will stop spreading this hateful rhetoric that I dislike. And it immediately drew me into confronting my own toxic masculinity, which is a thing I am very big about, and saying that all goes back to that all my life I thought I wasn't hurt unless I was dangerous. And that's what I've been trying to correct in me. And that is exactly why this impulse, I need to feel it, and I need to let it move on. And as soon as I had done that, then I realized, holy shit, this is about to start a whole firestorm of people throwing accusations around and violence starting to escalate. This may be the worst thing that ever happened in this country right now at this time. And so this is the reason why I think a major reason why we aren't doing well as a society at handling violence is because we aren't doing well at handling our emotions and being able to confront our inner child and say, you need to learn emotional regulation. You need, saying each of us within ourselves, listen, you need to learn that some feelings are going to come up because of your history, because of your trauma, because of your past, or because of your beliefs, and that those things are not things that you react to right now. Those are things that you have to know how to let them come up and let them move on, so that the wisdom can take hold to say, okay, this is bad, and you can start to think more clearly. And I do think, as I've said, since I started the Church of Korahor, one of the biggest surprises I have found in my role as a herald of reason is that my role is to make people feel things again, because so much of our lives, trauma has caused us to retreat in ourselves, most of us, and to feel less and try to feel less. It's like getting your heart broken in a relationship. You get your heart broken in a relationship, the first thing you say, I'll never love again. I'll never trust a woman again. I'll never blah, blah, I'll never date again. And it's not until you can let that go that you can start to turn around and see, well, I see why she didn't want to be with me. And yes, maybe she did something wrong, but I can see why she did it. Those things aren't going to happen until you can let that hurt part of you go. That's just you acting out of your feelings, guy. We spend so much of our lives getting our heart broken again and again and again and again and again that we start to feel less and less and less. And then lo and behold, we get to be people in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s. And what are we doing now? Everything we do is trying to feel things again. It's in the entertainment that we buy. It's in the medications that we buy. It's why we buy, untold number of Cialis and Viagra. It's why people are looking at porn more than ever before. Maybe.
I feel like you're invading my privacy, Joe.
Okay. I am calling out Gene very specifically, but the point is this, I'm like, we have this project, this meditation project we call Overview at the Church of Korahor. And that's what I'm going on my street preaching tour next week. For the next month, promoting this app on our website called Overview, in which our main objective here is to say we need to get as many people for free, as many people as possible, learning how to reconnect with their feelings before it's too late. And I do worry that that's exactly the kind of thing that, for all we know, could have prevented Jake Sanford, from doing what he did. I'm not making that claim, but for all I know, this is the major problem we have, is that people need to turn to something like meditation. And for most people, I will mention this, that's prayer. And if great, Prayer has very similar effects to meditation. It is in effect, if you do it right, whatever right is, you can have the same effect as meditation, and that's a good thing. So I think that we if we are going to reduce violence, we need to, especially among men, recapture what it means to involve ourselves in emotional regulation and learn the skill of emotional regulation that for too many of us, I would say almost all of us, we really didn't get as children. And or at least I'm speaking for me and speaking from the majority of men that I talk to on the subject. So
If I ever
thank you
want
for
to
letting me rant there.
If I ever want to get in touch with my toxic masculinity, I just go for a drive.
You know what? Going for a drive is the way I let go of mine most of the time.
It's because
Yeah.
every time I drive, I'm critical of everybody driving. If they
so
drive
they're driving
faster
on
than
the
me,
15.
they're driving too fast. If they drive slow than me, they're driving too slow. I don't know why I know the exact speed but the whole world should drive.
I
It's a
know that
superpower. That's all I can think.
It's like I remember when my middle child Elijah said, "I don't know what the I-15 is, but my daddy's certain that Mormons are the only ones driving on it." That's me all the time when I'm on the I-15. Like, hey, Brigham, get the fuck out of the.
That's right.
That's my toxic masculinity. You're right about that, James.
So, Jacob, what are your final words of how people can be peaceful?
Use words, not swords. I hope that there's a lot of people inspired to demonstrate the kind of masculinity that Charlie Kirk was demonstrated, to go publicly, use his words to engage in disagreements, and stand up for the truth, even in the face of desires for homicide.
There you go. Joe, any final words?
First of all, double down on what my friend Jacob Isbell just said, 100%. I would also add to that, in my perspective, critical thinking only makes it only makes all thinking better. And so the best critical thinking we can engage in, any critical thinking, because this always needs to be defined, because you say critical thinking, people only hear one of those words. And there are two words, and they're both important. You got to be thinking, but thinking critically, meaning challenging bias, your bias, other people's bias, getting to the objective truth of the matter by asking yourself, what do I want to believe? Just like I told you a minute ago with, my immediate feeling when Charlie Kirk died, and I have never celebrated the man's death. I will say that. Never celebrated as I understand celebrated. But my immediate feeling was relief. And it wasn't until I asked myself, whoa, guy, wait a minute, step back. What's that about? Where is that feeling coming from? That I could confront in myself and say, no, that's you reacting from your feelings in a way that is not healthy. You need to look at it from a fresher perspective. If we could all learn to do that a little bit more, I think we would have a much less violent world, not just in terms of political violence and people dying from, gunfire. I think we'd see fewer people hitting their spouses. I think we'd see fewer people hitting their children. I think we'd see a lot less calls to violence being celebrated with people fist pumping in crowds. If we could just pull back and say, wait a minute, what was that? No, I'm not in favor of that. Let's not start doing that. So there's no situation, I think, that isn't improved with critical thinking.
Amen. And even though you might not use these terms in your description of it, but I consider the sincere and dedicated pursuit of the truth, no matter what, to be a top godly pursuit.
Oh, I know that we were wrapping things up, but I just want to point something out what Jacob just said, because I agree. Well, I don't agree with the way you said it, but the thing that I love about this is, and I've been preparing for my sermon on Saturday at General Conference, well, in front of General Conference, is that the beautiful thing for me, and it's taken me a lot of healing to get to this place. The most beautiful thing to me about being ex-Mormon is having been Mormon, because I believe that we in the larger Mormon community share a standard of truth. I think that those of us who are ex-Mormon are right when we say, well, the J. Reuben Clark test, that, you know, the Book of Mormon, either the Book of Mormon and the church are true, and no criticism can harm it, or they're not true and it ought to be harmed. And we look at that. We all can agree on that standard. It's just some of us who said, yeah, and it's on the it should be harmed side. That's us. But what I love about it is, you know, and I'm sure you could speak more to this, maybe Jacob. In the evangelical world, you see people at each other's throats all the time, in my opinion, on very illogical things.
It's the conditions that led Joseph Smith to the start of what's known as the Restoration.
I agree. And Steve Pinecker and I have talked about that. I feel like we're all having this conversation. It's like Joseph Smith, whatever you feel about him, and I have very bad feelings about him, you can't deny he was reacting to the illogic, the poor logic of what was happening in the greater Christian world at the time. And, you know, people, you know, at each other's throats about the triune God versus not triune God, faith versus works versus grace, and getting after each other in every which way in that water baptism, fire baptism, salvation, whatever. All of this confusion that he's talking about, I think, led to a call for Joseph Smith, and more importantly for his father, Joseph Smith Sr., to search for what is a logical conclusion, what's a logical basis for faith. And I think even Korihor versus Alma is really breaking down why there has to be a logical answer to atheism. And so at least we can agree to the standard of truth, to say, look, it's either true and it's the most important thing in the world, or it's not true, and then it's a fraud, like President Hinckley said. I think Gordon B. Hinckley was right on that. He said either the Book of Mormon is true and it can't be harmed, or it is not true and it is the biggest fraud. The whole church is the biggest fraud in the history of the earth. Yeah, I agree. And that actually is why we are more of a community than we think we are, I think. And if we can let go the enmity in the language, we can maybe at least be able to come together and say, whatever we've said about each other, whatever we think about each other, I didn't want anybody to break into one of your houses of worship with his freaking truck and kill people and shoot children and light the building on fucking fire. I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
And it's a tragedy, no matter why or no matter how. And we can grieve as a people. We can grieve as a community. We had communion once before. We can do it again. That's my feelings.
I'm going to give it an amen.
Amen. Got it. I got you.
So thanks for Marquita Armstrong in the chat mentioning that there's other people who have been assassinated for their beliefs. And I don't remember exactly all the names that you named, Jacob, but
it's quite a list. But
is good.
We've got to use words, not swords.
Something that Mormon historians said is that Joseph Smith was probably the first presidential candidate to be assassinated.
I didn't realize that.
It's something that we don't get taught that in history.
When it's these public figures that get taken out through violence, it's a bold declaration that those opposing their positions do not feel confident that they can use their words to counter.
I agree. And, I'm oftentimes haunted by the fact that I don't remember if it was in his notes on Virginia or one of his letters. I want to say it's one of the letters to John Adams, because I love those and pore over them. Thomas Jefferson once said that he thought that France was very poorly governed and not going to be a very successful country on account of the fact that you couldn't have 20 million people governed by one government. Now, of course, this is a man that with the Louisiana Purchase, I think maybe he grew the American population to something like 2 million people total.
Wow.
And it's like now we're a nation of 300 million, somewhere in there. And it's like, it makes a little bit of sense to say the values of a nation founded on 13 colonies, at roughly 1 million citizens at the start, to scale that up to where we are now, frankly, was quite a feat. It was not without a lot of bloodshed, genocide, frankly, and it was not without a lot of immoral things that we did. But on the way, I feel like America also has been a great force for good. And our core values, among those core values that has really made America great, has been freedom of speech. We have to have it. And freedom of the press. We have to have it. When it corrodes, violence will ensue, I think. And I think on that we agree.
You and I are agreement there. Hey, Joe, I already sent you the flyer for Celestial Pearl Tacos. It'll be that Sunday if you can make it on out.
Let me see what I can do. I'm planning to do conference on Saturday morning and then head out to Tulsa. But let me see what I can work out.
We'll figure it out at some point.
So Jacob, I sent you a friend request. I also sent you something I happened upon today. It's a person who is a preacher, and he said that 10 years ago or whatever, he had similar beliefs to Charlie Kirk, and something changed. And he talks about his change. He's not anti Charlie Kirk, but he's just saying that, it's really a shame that Charlie Kirk wasn't given the opportunity to learn more and grow more and change at some point, right? Somebody robbed him of that. And so that it is a shame, and peace and dialogue are good. And hopefully that can continue in America. And that remains a value that's important to all Americans. And so thanks everybody for watching. I have to go play games with my wife so that my mental acuity stays above the low area that I'm in right now. If it dips any farther, I might have to be fed. But anyhow, I appreciate Jacob. And Jacob, I'm going to extend an opportunity to come on Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators and talk about your story and how you started a podcast. And so
super cool. I look forward to it.
Get that going. All right, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Are you good?
Thank you, Jacob, for accepting. Yep, I'm great. And thank you, Jacob, for accepting this invitation.
Thank you.
That's right.
To all of our friends in Church of Korihor and elsewhere, flash bright, my friends.